Hello, everybody. My name is Neil Johnson, and I am based in Auckland, New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest in the Aspire ED Talk series, the Ed Talks. And the topic of this particular talk is how valid is network meta-analysis? And it is my very great pleasure to welcome Ben Moll, my friend, who is a professor at Monash University in Victoria in Melbourne. Ben will be known to all of you, and he, of course, distinguishes himself by having an H factor and an I-10 index that is second to none. So I'm sure that he will be the absolute expert on this particular topic that looks at evidence synthesis, and particularly with regard to randomized trials. Now, so welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Neil, for that introduction, and thanks for Aspire for having us here. It's great, and I hope that we can, inform you some more about the topic than you already know in the coming 15 minutes.
Let's hope so. So we should start with our respective conflicts of interest or potential dualities. And I think it's probably fair to say that the most important one with regard to this topic is that both of us, particularly Ben, have been involved with network meta-analyses in the field of reproductive medicine. But that also I have a relationship with various companies in the last 5 years, including Abbott, Myovant Sciences, Gideon Richter, Ferring, Organon, Merck, and Gurbet. So I'll perhaps also hand to you, Ben, to make a declaration.
And I'm a consultant for Merck, Organon, and Norgine, and I've received research funding from Gurbet, Merck, and the NHMRC in Australia.
Thank you very much. So I suppose it's fair to ask you the question, what network meta-analysis actually involves.
Network meta-analysis is a special type of meta-analysis that aims to compare multiple interventions at the same time. So the traditional meta-analysis looks for all the studies, preferably randomized clinical trials, on a particular comparison with two interventions, and then adds that up and tries to see what the best is. But network meta-analysis for one disease looks for multiple, more than two interventions. Let's take the example ovulation induction, where you can do that with drugs, clomiphene, letrozole, metformin combinations, but you can also look at laparoscopic drilling, gonadotropins, etc. And then network meta-analysis aims at once to make a comparison between all those interventions.
I see. And so what do we end up with when comparing this? Does it involve some ranking of these treatments?
Yeah, the outcome of network meta-analysis is a ranking where in terms of probability, the probability is given that a particular treatment in that spectrum is the best one, followed by a second, a third, and a fourth one. So it's a little bit comparable to for those who watch the US Open, to a tennis ranking where multiple players have competed with each other, but not necessarily everyone has played against everyone. And still from that tournament, with Sinner as the winner this morning, you can also create a world ranking that is going to be available. And the ranking is not necessarily exactly the same as the result of the last tournament. And the reason is the ranking takes into account indirect comparisons, takes into account previous matches, and that is what network meta-analysis also does.
So it is a powerful statistical technique, Ben, that allows us to compare treatments that have never been directly compared, but
Yeah.
because they've been compared with other treatments.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the issue of ovulation induction, we're talking here in the field of infertility. If you would look at the Cochrane reviews that in a pairwise comparison assess the best treatments for ovulation induction, then you end up with more than 10 different Cochrane reviews. And it's going to be very difficult for an individual to pick out what then actually the best treatment is. So network meta-analysis, and we have published that I think 6 or 7 years ago in the British Medical Journal, led by Ray Wang, or Wang Ray, from Adelaide at the time. He's now in Sydney, who compared multiple regimens for ovulation induction, and found that either letrozole or the combination of Clomid and metformin were the best two treatments. And that was, I think, the meta-analysis that also finalized the finding that letrozole is better than Clomid in this area. But the underlying number of Cochrane reviews is, as I said, about 10 in this area.
So it is interesting, and there truly are examples where, with network meta-analyses in which you've been involved, we can have insights that we otherwise perhaps wouldn't have, and clearly it underscored the effectiveness of letrozole. But I think in that particular meta-analysis, one of the interesting things was it really highlighted the benefit of clomiphene plus metformin, which hitherto had been somewhat frowned on by the experts in the field. So, are there any other examples of
in our
from network meta-analyses? Sorry.
I've done one on types of stimulation in IUI, maybe not a very exciting treatment, but still a very widely applied treatment in our field. Absolutely. Where we compared gonadotropins, Clomid, and letrozole as compared to the natural cycle, and found there that gonadotropins actually resulted in the highest pregnancy rates. There are multiple, I've not done that, but multiple network meta-analysis done on the effectiveness of different types of add-ons in IVF. And if I take it a little bit further away outside the field of reproductive medicine, induction of labor is a very important topic, where you have multiple techniques to do induction of labor. Another very important and very famous one is postpartum hemorrhage, where there are multiple treatments available to prevent or treat postpartum hemorrhage. And these are all examples where one meta-analysis and one document is actually able to guide clinicians in the best choice, or at least the best 2 or 3 competitors out of a large series.
Absolutely.
I think it's very fun.
Yeah. And ask any individual who has been in need of treatment for any of those conditions, anyone needing induction of labor, treatment for postpartum hemorrhage, they really want to know which the very best treatment is, or the very best few treatments options are, of course.
Yeah, we all should know that, and realize that it's the power is not only maybe in picking the best, but the power is also in clearly showing which maybe 6 or 7 options are potentially not suitable or inferior. So realize that, and I think that hopefully the audience that is looking at us comes from multiple, I'm sure they come from multiple places in Asia and maybe multiple places in the world. There's going to probably be an enormous amount of practice variation among the people that are listening to us. And in the end, that is not a good thing. But it's not so much for us to pick out of 8 or 10 available treatments the best option. The first thing to do is to make sure that 5 or 6 or 7 options that are clearly inferior are not used. And if you setting in Auckland, then take a little bit of another drug than I take in my setting or Monash, or someone listening in Taipei or Bangkok or Beijing. Yeah, that as long as you pick from the top two or three, I think we already make an enormous progress as compared to the
Mm.
current. I think that's
That's
a
right. So I
really
think. Mm.
important gain of a network meta-analysis.
Mm. So I think we can tell from what you've said that these are the situations in which network meta-analysis can work the best, I suppose. Are there any other comments about situations where it works very well, or do you think that really
Well,
summarizes it?
I think so. One important condition, and we'll talk a little bit about that further on, is that the disease that you study is well defined in the
Mm,
underlying meta-analysis. So we can talk about
mm,
anovulation, PCOS, types of infertility. If the underlying nature of that PCOS is really different between the studies, the comparison can become difficult or compromised. So that's a thing
mm,
to look at. But I think the current definitions that we have about PCOS, poor ovarian reserve, Bologna criteria, etc., help us a lot in the homogenization of the studies. Another important thing and application, I think, is in the build-up for research. So to find
mm,
out two or three best comparisons that you want to further evaluate in your research,
mm,
network meta-analysis is actually a very powerful tool to do that, right?
mm,
If you again have a spectrum of 5, 6, 7, 8 treatments, and you don't know where to start with your RCTs, then a network meta-analysis can help you to limit the number of candidates to be evaluated further, maybe to 2 or 3. That's also a very powerful tool.
mm, mm. So, I mean, obviously, the assumption in a network meta-analysis that all of the patients in all of the, let's say, randomized trials have the same disease, well defined, and I think that was one of the problems that we had, to some extent, dare I say it, with the endometriosis network meta-analysis of the fertility
Right.
treatments. So that obviously is a key assumption. There is a heterogeneity in amongst all women who have endometriosis related infertility, as well as the coexistence of adenomyosis. Are there any other key assumptions, would you say, Ben, for effectively undertaking NMA?
Well, I would say that the quality of the underlying study should be good.
Mm,
There's obviously tools to assess that in terms of grade, etc. You apply that methods also before you do the final evidence synthesis, and realize
mm,
also that if you have, let's say, packages of treatments that it is and they are linked by one individual study or group of studies that makes one comparison, then the validity of those specific studies is very important. So if you
mm,
have, let's say, a bigger network meta-analysis with 15 studies around one particular treatment and 15 type of studies around another type of treatment, then the connection between these two bigger hemispheres, so to say, is really important. And if that
mm,
particular comparison is either unreliable because of a low quality of the study or because of a limited statistical significance, then the whole network becomes shaky, so to say. And
mm,
you
mm,
do that by making network plots first, where you plot the size of the studies in the circle of the study,
mhm,
and the bigger the size, the stronger the study is, and the connection between those circles is also, people might know that or look that up, is by a line that is very thick or very thin. If
mm,
the line is
mm,
thick, then that means that there is validity in that comparison.
mm,
If that particular line becomes very thin, yeah, then your network meta-analysis becomes less robust, less
And
valid.
it's very interesting to look at the geometry of the network plots, and the size of the nodes, as you've mentioned, the thickness of the lines, the comparisons between them, and then we seem to have sort of outliers sticking on the outside of various network plots,
Yeah,
where I think we'd call them open loops, wouldn't we? Where there's only really that one comparison, and that is
yeah.
obviously one has to be quite tentative in drawing major conclusions from that.
True, but again, it's not only the direct consequence for clinical care, it's also the build-up for future research, and specifically there, these type of plots are very valuable. Obviously, if you can
It's very
see on
helpful
the
in.
network where actually the information is not strong, has low quality, or has limited power and therefore wide uncertainty, yeah, that is perfect to justify your future research. Also, I would say in grant applications, if people are watching
Mm,
who write in grant applications, then I think good network meta-analysis is a very strong start of your application, whether
mm.
you publish that first or whether you just put it in your grant application. But that's a very important piece of work to do.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, Ben. And I think we're seeing more and more network meta-analyses done. And as the methodology evolves, we're seeing better quality
Yeah.
network meta-analyses. It's like anything. And so not only is this important in excellent clinical care, but it's also important in hypothesis generation. And yes, that's right, competing for research funding. Um, So we have, in the just perhaps a couple of minutes that remain, we have touched on some of um, the limitations and pitfalls, and many have questioned the validity of network meta-analyses and haven't really appreciated that these comparisons within the same disease can be made, as long as with the provisos that you mentioned with regard to definition of the disease. Are there any other sort of concerns that you would raise about network meta-analyses, Ben?
Yeah, there's one, Neil, that I want to touch upon, and we chatted a little bit about it already in our preparation for this podcast. But that is the validity and the trustworthiness of the underlying studies.
Mm,
And I'm afraid I have to raise that here. As you told me, I'm quite published with a passion of doing clinical trials over the last 25 years. But the last 5 years, I'm really worried about the trustworthiness of RCTs in our field, and that is a big threat also for
mm,
meta-analysis. And I'm afraid to say that my estimate is that 25% of the randomized clinical trials in our field actually is not trustworthy, which means that
mm,
it doesn't mean necessary that it's fabricated. It might be unintentional wrong handling of methodology, but the
mm,
consequence that these studies misinform clinical practice, and
mm,
specifically in network meta-analysis, that is a problem because if these studies end up in the crucial comparisons that link the network, then they might
mm.
invalidate the whole network. So one of the
Yeah.
things we have started to do in response of that, we have started to do individual participant data meta-analysis in a network meta-analysis. So it might be a
Mhm.
little bit complicated here for the listener, but what we do here is we approach authors from original studies to share their data. And that gives the best insight, so to say, in the validity of these data.
Mm,
And I'm afraid to say that the statistics that we get here are not reassuring. We are not able to collect usually more than 50% of the data that are published. Also on relatively new topics like endometrial scratching, where you would say the studies are 10, 15 years old, so everybody should have these data. It's not the case. We get less than 50% of the data. We've published that in Reproduction Update. And when we get the data, even 10% of the studies turns out to have trustworthiness study issues within those studies. So that is really a big concern, and I would call upon everybody in our field, no matter what your role is, to think about this issue and do something about it. I'm passionate. I think that's the reason I'm part of this podcast. I'm passionate about making medical knowledge. I'm very proud of that's my core business throughout my career, so to say. And I'm passionate about it. I'm proud of what has been achieved by me and by others. But at the same time, there is a big issue and a big threat to the product of medical knowledge that we try to create.
Well, Ben, thank you for highlighting that. And look, you're right. When this is the bedrock, as it is, of all that we do in medicine, of all the treatments that we provide, I think it shouldn't really just be the responsibility of enthusiasts like yourself looking out for work where the reliability of the work is in question. I think that is a collective responsibility that all of us who understand this should bear. Look,
if I may, it's a last comment on that. I think it's important for the well-being of our patients, but also for the trust that the public has in science, and it's very important for the large majority of us who do the right thing. So let's not forget that the large majority of the people are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's a few people who create a lot of problems, and that is a worry also for the people who do the right thing close to the people who do the wrong thing, so to say. So there are many reasons to speak out of this, and I hope that this podcast will help Aspire and the Aspire leadership to pick up this challenge.
And I'd like to thank you very much. That has been an amazingly wide-ranging discussion on the validity of network meta-analysis that I have very much enjoyed, and I hope that all our watchers and listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure, and everybody feel free to contact me with specific questions, ben.mol@monash.edu. Thank you, Aspire, and thank you, Neil.
Thank you.